Welcome to another episode of the Bionicle Inspiration series. This is another episode where we cover the 2018 Bio Cup. This time we are talking once again about round 2 of the Bio Cup, and we're talking about some entries that were really freaking cool, and we're going to have a little bit of a discussion as to why they are so cool. Of course, the theme for round 2 was holidays, and so we're going to take a look at 4 mocks that are holiday inspired. So let's get started. The first mock we have today is by Poor Disadvantaged and is called Magoos the Piper. So this mock was actually built for a holiday called Apelia. It's according to Wikipedia, it refers to any variety of fire festivals held annually in islands of Scotland. And so what I think is really clever about this mock is he's more or less just taken those words fire and Scotland and put them into one really, really clever, awesome mock. You know, he's got stuff like the bagpipes and sort of the kilt and all sorts of other different things that you would more typically see on somebody who's all dressed up and is from Scotland. And then he's added these really awesome fire effects and things at the back there. And then also kind of looks like some of the fire is coming out of the bagpipes, which is awesome. So very, very cool to see that, and a very creative way and a creative take on that theme, to literally take 2 words, smush them together, find things that sort of slightly relate to them, and then build something off of that. I've mentioned this in the last holiday episode. That's something I think is really creative and really cool, and something that's quite commendable to the builders that were in this round. Is some of the holiday ideas were quite difficult to work with, but yet they were still able to make some really awesome mocks. And so I think it's really interesting to study, well, okay, what did they do that helped them to kind of get those ideas and get to where they are? And pretty much what it is, well, like we see with this mock, they just took some words and explored that concept until something cool came up. So I think that's really, really clever. Something else that I think is really clever is a lot of the kind of system pieces throughout this mock. You know, like I said before, he's kind of got the kilt down there at the bottom, and then he's got some cloth there over the torso. And I think that's really, really awesome because, yeah, he looks like a Scotsman. That's really clever. But it kind of reminds me a little bit, too, of T'Chaka from Black Panther. Of course, I will be referencing Marvel because that's what I love. But those sort of cloth additions over T'Chaka's armor that we saw, they look similar to this to some degree. And we really don't have cloth that looks anything like that, or anything like, you know, a traditional kilt or anything like that sort of texture would look like. And so going system with that, you can get some really cool results. And you're able to kind of match that texture very nicely. You're able to, kind of like the kilt has, use some of these teeth pieces here and stuff to kind of give it sort of different effects and things. And so I think that's something to keep in mind. You know, if you can't quite match something that's cloth-like, or you're kind of going for a more unique look, like something you would see on a Scotsman or T'Chaka, then maybe you can look at some system alternatives to really match that pattern, or even to kind of get the right shaping and stuff. Because with system, you've got kind of clip pieces and hinge pieces and things like that, so you can kind of achieve some really unique angles and results and stuff. So yeah, that's definitely something to think about. One thing I just noticed that wasn't in my notes, but I absolutely love it, is the head design on this mock. He's used a humongous foot there for a kind of face, or possibly even a beard. That's very, very clever. I love that. Very nicely done. Again, that guy who asked for instruments, that's already 3 mocks I could have done that had instruments in them, so that could have been an episode, my bad. But besides the point, what an awesome bagpipe design. We actually see that it uses a Wenua mask there. So for those guys who keep asking for a mask used episode, which will be out, don't you worry, probably this weekend, and I'll probably record that for then. But besides the point, you could use a mask for a musical instrument. Something I quite like about that is, before I zoomed in on the image, I thought it was just a bunch of wires and flex tube and things like that to kind of form sort of the main part of the bagpipe there. But no, it's actually the Wenua mask. And did I just say Wenua mask? Onawanuva mask. Who am I? The Bionicle Inspiration series guy is saying the wrong names of the original Toa. How very dare I? Anyway, my bad. Besides the point, though, the texture of that mask, you know, a lot of people have sort of been up for debate about how much they love the Nuva masks, because they can look a little, I don't know, odd to a degree. That said, I really like them. But besides the point, just the kind of shaping of that mask and just the way it looks, the sort of texture of it, for lack of a better term, it kind of looks a bit, I don't know, it just sort of fits. Like I said, it kind of looks like tubing and sort of things you might see on a bagpipe, I guess. So, yeah, kind of look at the masks that you've got, play around with them and see, you know, maybe I can actually put this into, you know, some aspect of my mock that I'm currently working on, whether it's an instrument or we'll actually see some mask use later on in the episode, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. So I will get to that a little bit soon. So, Awesome mock from Mr. Poor Disadvantage, some very clever stuff going on there, and a great take on the theme. Let's move on to a mock by Vlad Lasin. Now, for those of you who saw an episode in the past, I said that Vlad Lasin was knocked out of the Bio Cup, and he, of course, was the previous victor of last year's Bio Cup, which is really cool. But I messed up. That dinosaur mock did actually get him through the next round, which was Holidays. This was the mock that he was knocked out of the competition from. And I'm still amazed that that's the case, because this is a fabulous, very well-designed mock. So it is a shock to see him taken out of the competition. Let's see who wins this year, because they've taken out some pretty awesome builders. Besides the point, let's talk a little bit about this mock. I absolutely love it. This, of course, is inspired by the holiday or sub-theme of Chinese New Year, which is definitely quite obvious. This is very much something you see around that time of the year, and this is a brilliant analog of that in Bionicle form. I think it's fantastic. I think it looks awesome, and something I really like about it is, of course, this probably isn't directly meant to be a Matoran, but it's essentially a Matoran holding up this big dragon mask, much like you would see in typical Chinese New Year celebrations. And I love that. I love the idea of being able to build a much smaller mock, whether it's a Matoran or a little tiny Rahi, or even just a little cute small dude that you want to make that has nothing to do with the Bionicle world. It's really cool to be able to see, just a slight addition that's able to make a small, nicely built mock even cooler. Maybe you have a Matoran that you've currently built. Well, why not build this awesome dragon mask that he wears, or give him a big old weapon, or maybe he's sitting on some kind of laser gun, or he's got a spaceship or something like that. I just think that's really cool, is to, build a mock that's a little bit more simple or small, but give it something really awesome that kind of gives it that extra wow factor. I think that's just a great concept, at least in my eyes. So very clever to add some of these wing sail pieces and even some red cloth here at the back, just to kind of cover some stuff up. It kind of works. You kind of see a lot of that sort of stuff with these kind of dragon masks, or the kind of dragon mascot things, whatever they're called. So it fits, but it's also a good way to kind of cover things up without having to use huge amounts of parts. And also, I'm sure it makes the mock a little bit more lightweight, which makes it a bit easier for it to hold its own weight, which is always something to think about as well when building. One thing I absolutely love about this is the system additions on the eyes. It's essentially just a series of repeating dish parts or round plates and things like that, and they're essentially just kind of getting smaller and smaller, and putting them all together like that, you get a really detailed eye effect. And because this is a naturally larger head, you're able to use larger dishes, but you could easily achieve this result with smaller dishes or smaller studs and things like that, and get a similar result. It's really cool. It's really clever. Just layering parts like that. I think that's really awesome to see, and achieves a really effective result on this mock. There's a lot of personality and life behind the dragon mask because of that. I think that's very creative. Also really cute to see the little Matoran hands there are just little tail parts as he's holding up the mask. Kind of makes it a little bit comical in my eyes. I think it's awesome. It's like he's not that strong and he's struggling to hold it up, but I don't know, I really like that. I think that's a very nice addition. And another thing that I think is really cool is all the whiskers and feathers and things, which are, of course, shown through the white parts throughout this dragon head there. And something that I think is really cool is the specific whiskers around the nose. This big one here that was one of those parts that you would have seen on Witch Doctor, the big white claw part there. It's always something that I think is really helpful, is to just, when you're building something, just get a big old part, put it in, and then from there you're able to kind of get a whole bunch of connection points off of that. This piece doesn't have a huge amount of connection points, mainly just sort of the axle on the end and the lightsaber rod addition on the other end. But the middle bit has a bit of a gap there, which you can actually sort of shove pieces in and stuff. So that's always something to think about as well. Maybe there's not a direct connection to the mock, but you could still sort of somehow attach some kind of piece, whether it's illegally or not. You might be able to. And so I think that's something to think about if you're kind of struggling with where to go next on a mock. Just grab a big part or any kind of piece that has any amount of connection points, and then just from there, just see kind of where you can go with that. Having a whole bunch of connection points kind of opens up a lot of possibilities, and you can just kind of play around and go, okay, well, I don't even know what to add. Well, there's a lightsaber rod connection on this piece I added. I'll just start putting a lightsaber rod in, maybe add this, that, and the other, and suddenly you've got something. Or you've got nothing, and you've realized, well, okay, that didn't work. What can I try next? So yeah, that's something to think about. So anyway, very awesome mock from Vlad Lasin. Awesome concept, awesome execution. A shame you didn't make it to the next round. I love what you made. Let's look at the next mock, which is by our good man Jafer, and is called Merav and Wujtek. Or Wujtek. So this was, of course, the holiday or sub-theme of Defender of the Fatherland Day, which, according to Wikipedia, is a Russian holiday which marks the date in 1918 during the Russian Civil War when the first mass draft into the Red Army occurred in Moscow. Interesting stuff. So, a really clever, interesting take on that holiday. What I think is really cool is, we mentioned before, mask usages on one of the earlier mocks, and we see here on this really awesome, well-designed bear with a gun on its back, another Nuva mask. It is the Pahatu Nuva mask. Got the name right that time. And yeah, it's just cool to kind of use that as kind of the link between the arm and the kind of body of the bear. Essentially, I think kind of the best way to, kind of implement that into your own stuff is just, if you're building something and you're kind of not sure what piece to put in, just play around with masks. Maybe it's a great way to add some shaping onto a specific part of the body, whether it's the arm or the body itself or the leg, anything like that. And just, kind of see what you can do, because some of these Nuva masks, they're quite large. So it's definitely a possibility to implement them on a body or on a leg, any part of the body, any part of the mock. And just use it for shaping, use it to kind of cover up a whole bunch of space, use it to just make things look a little bit more organic and flow nicely. It's just treat a mask as if it were any other kind of part. Just because it's something that you always typically on a Lego set put on the face doesn't mean you can't put it anywhere else on the mock. So just play around if you're building something. Just see, well, can I put this mask, on the shoulder, on the torso, on the thigh? See what you can do. Staying on this bear mock, I love the idea of just shoving guns and stuff on animals. I mean, it's inhumane in the real world, but this is Bionicle, so see what you can do. But still, it's really cool, and a very, very nice bear head design there. It's all very primarily system, but man, he looks angry. And I think that's really cool. And I mean, the fact he looks so angry is just because he's kind of got those eyebrows there, which gives him that expression there. So if you can add eyebrows to a mock, it's a great way to add even more personality. I think that's really, really awesome to see. Always also really cool to see sort of companions with the mocks. Obviously, the green mech, I would say, is the more kind of primary mock that is associated with this mock. And then his companion is, of course, this awesome gun-toting bear. I think that's really, really clever and really cool. Always nice to give your mock some kind of sidekick or companion. Really, really cool. Speaking of really cool, love the thigh design on this green mecha robot guy here. It uses some panel pieces from the old Ninjago Mech Dragon, which was a fantastic set. A lot of Bionicle builders seemed to buy it and thought it was really, really cool. And honestly, it came with a lot of really useful parts for Bionicle. Came with a lot of system parts that you can kind of integrate nicely with Bionicle, and it came with a lovely amount of sand green pieces, which it's always a lovely color to work with. And I'm sure if you talk to any Bionicle mockist, they will tell you, hey, I wish we had more colors with our CCBS sets. And sand green is definitely a fun color that I wish was in more CCBS sets. Thank you, Boba Fett. So yeah, it's something to play around with. Pick up any kind of manner of Lego set that, of course, isn't Bionicle or CCBS and go, hey, you know what, maybe I can use this on a Bionicle in some fashion. And a Mech Dragon is the perfect answer and perfect, in my opinion, one of the best sets to incorporate into Bionicle. So something to think about there. Something else I love about this mock is the awesome Gatling gun here. Essentially just made using a bunch of sort of wheel pieces, gears, and other sort of various sort of round parts, and then finding a way to kind of link them all together, and then getting a bunch of axles and things like that to kind of create the rotating barrel of the gun there. Simple but really effective and works really nicely, kind of really helps kind of convey this military mecha, awesome looking kind of design there. I think it's really cool. And also really cool to see another mask use here on the head, flipping the mask upside down. That's always something to think about. Maybe you don't have to place a piece in the way that it was intended to be placed. Think about placing it sideways, upside down, any manner of ways that you can achieve a really cool design. Also really cool to see a mono eye mock. That's always something to think about. If it's a robot or whatever, does it need to have 2 eyes? Maybe it can have 1. Maybe it can have 5. Who knows? Anyway, awesome stuff from Jafer. Very, very nicely done. And very, very cool. Love this mock to death. Very, very nice. Let's quickly move on to the bonus mock. Briefly touch upon this because we're running over time. This mock is by Arctic Pine and is called Day of the Dead Skull. Of course, this is, again, for the holiday, the Day of the Dead. And I think this is a really creative, unique way of capturing that holiday. Absolutely love the nice part use here, using these stud shooters as teeth on a skull. So clever. I absolutely love that. Especially, too, making one of them golden, giving him an old little golden tooth there. Lovely little detail, lovely little addition. I think that's fantastic. And I think that's something else to think about as well, just with the mock in general. Do you actually need to build a humanoid character? Do you need to build a beast man or dude, Toa, Matoran, anything like that? You can just sort of set up a photo to look a bit like, like a scene out of real life, or decorations on a tree, or in this case just a little setup of some ornaments and things that you might see hanging around during the Day of the Dead festivals. So it's something to think about, just setting up some candles, some skulls, a big old skull, big old crystal skull like that with a very nicely designed hat on it. It's something to think about, So it's always, in my opinion, really cool to see sort of different interpretations of the same concept or the same theme or the same idea. So it's really cool. I absolutely love what this mock has done. I especially love what he's done with the hat here. We've seen a few cowboy hats in our time on the Bionicle Inspiration series. Not a lot, but a few. But this one's quite different from some of the other ones we've seen, using these tube pieces here to kind of create the rim of the hat, and then kind of layering some Exoforce shells and stuff like that to form the kind of top of the hat there. Clever, creative, absolutely love it. It works very nicely. And I also really like the stars there on their eyes, just very fitting for that kind of Day of the Dead aesthetic that you quite often see. Very, very nicely done. So some very clever piece usages here, and some creative, interesting concepts to think about with this mock, and honestly with all 4 of the mocks that we've seen in this episode. So fantastic work to all the builders involved. Be sure to stay tuned for more BioCup coverage. We will be concluding our coverage of Round 2 very soon, and then we will be making our way into covering more of Round 3. Very, very exciting stuff coming up soon. We'll see you in the next episode. Happy building. See you soon.